you understood how much of your stuff is tracked right now inside this system and you think it isn't, all of these connected systems are all part of that centralized control. You are inside of that. Where are you safe in a centralized system that takes all of its control through you through manipulated money? What is safe? Good luck.
Over the last 5 years, the dollar has crashed to a point that it buys you 50% of those goods. So what you're afraid of has already happened. Are you thinking this is something more drastic coming that is going to happen sooner than later?
We know for sure money is being debased. We know for sure you have a decentralized, secure protocol bounded by energy that can't be changed. Bitcoin is repricing the world through the free market. It's the first global free market that's ever existed. Bitcoin would be the only thing remaining of value. If we've never lived in a free market and our actions inside the other system are trying to get rich in a zero-sum game where somebody has to lose because we won, every single asset we're trading within that system is really just a bet on how much is somebody else is going to lose because I'm going to win, all on a centralized system. And there's no way to fix it. The rate of improvement of AI, it will never be this slow again. It will never be this dumb again. If you don't use it, other businesses are going to use it to provide more value, and it's going to remove labor at a staggering rate.
All right, Jeff. Man, we had such a fun time hanging out in Abu Dhabi back in December. Seems like a world away at this point. And we had this conversation where we went outside and hung out for a little bit, and I had a video guy there, and we tried to capture the conversation, and it just didn't come out. The audio just wasn't good enough. And since that time, it's been not even 90 days yet. So much of the world has changed. We were talking about Bitcoin, AI, and AI agents. And since that time, we've seen just the rise of this take off, and we've seen now multiple, at least I've seen, I'm sure you have as well, multiple instances of AI agents going out and completing tasks autonomously and using Bitcoin Lightning to do transactions. I don't know if you've seen this.
Yep. Yeah, I have.
Yeah. At that conference, I made the case that I think maybe one of the big use cases of a medium exchange might come from the machines because they need a money that they don't have a solution for at this point, and Bitcoin seems to maybe solve that problem, being personless, for example, high frequency transactions, things like that. What do you think about how fast that space is growing, and maybe its necessity or needing Bitcoin or something like that to work?
Yeah, and that was our conversation was fantastic, and I think that's a part of it. But I don't think that's a key part of that medium of exchange. I think ultimately, Bitcoin is repricing the world through the free market. It's the first global free market that's ever existed. And like, if you want to talk about prices falling now, or what, really what it's doing is it's lagging it's the canary in the coal mine to a deflationary spiral out of a credit system that would reset everything. And so in that event, Bitcoin would be the only thing remaining of value. And you know that, I know that. And so then when that, because that credit system that we live in cannot be allowed to deflate without a complete collapse, you're going to see a massive liquidity, or as that big print, or
the big print.
Exactly. Or anything that we want to talk about it, or Lynn Alden, the nothing stops this train. All of this is the same thing, right? The existing credit-based system requires manipulation at exponential rates to offset the productivity that should flow to us in the form of lower prices through AI and everything and everything else that we're building. So taken. Yes, I do think there is a case that some of these agents will use kind of Lightning and this is a medium of exchange. But I think the bigger change, the far greater change, is all prices are falling relative to Bitcoin. And so essentially the energy-backed system that can't be broken is repricing the world. And most people are pricing that energy-backed system from a piece of paper that's being manipulated.
that's happening. We're witnessing it. I think I remember, man, it wasn't that a few months ago. One of my friends called me at night, kind of panicking. He saw something on the news. And what is this? Like, the dollar's going to crash. Am I going to wake up one day and the money in my bank's going to buy me, 50%, half as much goods as it does right now? And I said, well, that's already happened.
Yeah, totally.
Over the last 5 years, the dollar has crashed to a point that it buys you 50% of those goods. So what you're afraid of has already happened. Whereas people think it's like this imminent thing, though, where it's going to happen. I think it's happening. It's like a process more than an event, maybe. Unless it's like the gradually and then suddenly part, which at some point diminishing returns, I guess, fall off of a cliff. But, I mean, are you seeing this? I mean, obviously it seems to be accelerating, especially based off of where we're at right now at the time of this recording, March 10th. But are you thinking this is something more drastic coming that is going to happen sooner than later?
I think it's exactly what you just described. This has been so it's interesting to watch people talk about Bitcoin and everything and the existing financial system through a light switch moment rather than what's happening all of the time. We know for sure money is being debased.
Right.
We know for sure you have a decentralized secure protocol bounded by energy that can't be changed. So both of those things are, depending on your reality, is what you're actually seeing. And so if you've been in Bitcoin for 5 years, you know what's happened over the last 5 years. If you've been in Bitcoin for 10 years, you know what's happened over the last 10 years. If you're in Bitcoin 5 years from now, you know it's going to happen. And it's going to happen in a faster rate until, yes, depending on what country you're in, there's going to be some massive dislocations and repricing events that could happen a lot faster. Right, that's just a failure of a currency. I suspect the U.S. currency is not going to fail anytime soon. So it's going, but it might print a lot more, right, and get away with it, and which would lead to a significant rise in at least in that currency's point of view to Bitcoin. It fascinates me watching people grapple with the one thing, like every day there's a new thing that they're saying this is the reason, when fundamentally nothing has changed for the last 15 years. You knew one system was insolvent. It couldn't resolve this problem. You knew the system transition was underway. And so if you're mostly outside the system, if you're in Bitcoin, these dips just provide opportunity to accumulate more.
Yeah, I guess just, not everybody has that certainty, right? Not everybody has that level of conviction, nor does anybody have the ability to tell the future either. And so I think then it probably comes down to the level of conviction and certainty that you have around that. And
so let's dig a little deeper on there, and because that's why this is. I think this is why it doesn't actually say anything about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just a ledger that every 10 minutes there's a new block that is bounded by energy. You're grappling with something that is imposing a discipline on a world without discipline because it's like this. So the conviction is driven by this. I would venture to say the only conviction what you should spend all your time on is, can Bitcoin stay decentralized and secure? Because if it can, or if it does, and you're weighting your probabilistic weighting of whether it does or not, it's actually the only thing that matters in what we just described. There is nothing else that matters. And you could say, I believe governments are going to attack it. I believe quantum is going to break it. I believe, and all of those are beliefs, and you could assign a different probability. But if it stays decentralized and secure, it actually doesn't. It makes no difference. It is repricing the world.
Right. Yeah, I think obviously we agree on that. I think back to just people not developing that conviction, we're still seeing a world where people are pushing XRP, not understanding the difference between XRP or Solana or whatever, right? So for you to say if it stays decentralized and secure, most people don't even know what that means.
Yeah,
they don't even understand what decentralization is. and why Bitcoin might be different than any one of those other assets. And so I think you first have to come to that realization first, right?
Yeah. I think we're saying the same thing, kind of, and you've gone really deep on this subject. I've gone really deep on this subject. I've probably spent over 10,000 hours trying to disprove what I just said.
Yeah,
spending all my time in can it stay decentralized and secure against natural centralization that we've always allowed through human. So we have to be. What I'd say to that is, if currencies have always been centralized, whether it's gold and then repriced or some, then we must be part of the thing that allows them to be centralized. And so can Bitcoin withstand that? Is really the ultimate question. Can it withstand us? How many of us know? How many of us run nodes? What does it look like? And so I went through the same thing that everybody would go through, and the cognitive dissonance of there's no way this thing could do that, and then coming to a greater appreciation of why I believed it would stay decentralized and secure. But again, I think we're saying the same thing. So it doesn't say anything about Bitcoin. It says the cognitive dissonance that's going on in every single human mind in trying to understand something that's never been in existence before.
Right.
That's really what's happening.
Yeah. So you, as a futurist, as a technologist, I mean, you understand it's just like it's really hard for people to imagine the future because typically we can only imagine better versions of what we have today.
Totally.
So when you have something completely different that we don't have, so we try to then compare it to something. Well, it's sort of like this. Well, it is, but it's not. And well, it's like this. Well, it sort of is not. So then it's very hard to understand, well, what is this thing that we don't know what it is? It's all these different things and will become something we can't even imagine today. But I think to the point that you were making earlier, you're 10,000 hours in, that is what separates those who have put in the work. They can build that level of conviction, which then allows them to, I think, number one, take larger position sizes, but then number two, sort of have the ability to sort of ride out these volatility waves in ease. And even, dare I say, look for them opportunistically, I remember it was this September of last year, which is not that long ago. I had, I think Bitcoin was in the mid 60s, 68,000. It dropped down to like 63,000. So I had a little bit of extra cash. I moved some over to an exchange to go ahead and get a buy. And then it dropped to like 58. And I was like, I'll buy a little bit more. And I'm like, I think it could drop to 50. So I put a buy order in at 50. And it never got filled. It never went down, right? And it ran, and then it, went to 100, and then 106, and then 110. I'm like, oh man, I should have just got it to 58. If it drops back down, if it gets back into that 80 range, I'm backing up the truck, and like here we are. So it's like we can sort of look for those moments. I'm curious what you think about just, obviously there's that, right? If it stays decentralized and secure, and then there's the big print, and it's not just the U.S. big print. I mean, right now we have, just in the last week, China is now doing a big print, and Germany and the EU just announced a big print for their security and stuff like that. So it's happening all over the world. But at the same time that's happening, also the way technology is evolving is changing the world, right? So like sort of bringing it back to AI, which is sort of like the general markets, like big darling sort of thing, is we have like AI has been that big thing, open AI, the way they're raising money, things like that. Then all of a sudden we see like DeepSeek come out in China, which I think changed the way we value traditional assets in a way. Like number one, they're able to produce an asset, this AI model way cheaper with way less GPUs, which then disrupted all the forecasts of NVIDIA and tech companies. But also what it did is it disrupted the NASDAQ. Well, maybe some of the money will move from the U.S. markets over to the China market. So maybe the NASDAQ index is overvalued. Maybe the companies listed on the NASDAQ are overvalued. Maybe all these AI companies are overvalued. Like, whoa, what do we even know? And then it sort of laid open and exposed all these assumptions that we have because of this fiat system that we have. And so It almost looked like all of a sudden we do need some sort of a new measuring or unit of account there.
Yeah, so this is kind of why it boggles my mind that this is still so misunderstood, because it's the same thing I wrote about 6 years ago. It's exactly the same thing. You would have exponential rate of technology improvement. The natural state of the free market is deflation. So that productivity in a free market, because we only use the things that give us more value. So obviously we're going to use the things that give us more value, and they would be coming at us so fast, which the output of that had to be deflation. And then in a free market, prices fall to the marginal cost of production. So what's the marginal cost of production of a line of code? I used to say it all the time on your calculator app. 0, because it's a line of code.
Right.
What's the marginal cost of a line of code created by other lines of code? AI. 0. What does that look like as it moves into physical goods, as it moves into robotics, and this AI is actually tackling all the physical goods? Almost 0. Because those companies are going to compete everywhere to be able to put this, and then the cost of all those physical goods is going to fall at the same rate. And so that productivity means faster and faster productivity. And people are measuring that productivity through the system that's stealing the productivity to try to make GDP go up. So it has to concentrate. It has to centralize. So if the natural state of the free market is deflation, if prices fall to the marginal cost of production, if this is true, which we know is for sure true, if you can nod your head, you can do all the research you want on that topic, then unfortunately what it means is you've never lived in a global free market. All of the things you're pointing at and giving strength through your actions, this this person's going to fix it, they're all centralizing functions, and they have to be, because it cannot let that system, that debt-based system, that credit-based system, which we live in and price everything from, it won't let it collapse, because you won't let it collapse. So every single conspiracy theory, all of those things are inside that system, because they have to be inside that system, because you won't let it collapse. Right. And so once you understand that, you stop giving your time to, it's going to be a chaotic journey from one system to another, as people have a hard time grappling with what I just described. But you stop giving your time to the system that's stealing your time and energy.
So you're saying the more that you participate in the system, then you're reinforcing that system.
Yeah, everything within it. We know, a whole bunch of your listeners would know, gold gets co-opted. It gets co-opted by derivatives. And if that ever got reset, then it would sink the system. So what they're really saying is, because it centralizes, it always gets repriced, and people cheat. People have always cheated on money,
right?
And so it always allows that. You can't audit how much gold China has in the reserves. You can't. If we said we were going to audit Fort Knox, I don't think it'll be a true audit. And then you can't audit what everybody else says. Whereas Bitcoin's blockchain is getting audited every 10 minutes, right? It doesn't care. So this centralized. So what we're saying with some of these assets within the system is it really, and I had to deal with this myself too, the cognitive dissonance I was dealing with it, is if we've never lived in a free market and our actions inside the other system are trying to get rich in a zero-sum game where somebody has to lose because we won, every single asset we're trading within that system is really just a bet on how much somebody else is going to lose because I'm going to win, all on a centralized system. And there's no way to fix it. And so that's what really pushed me into exploring, is Bitcoin different first? Could it remain decentralized and secure against that power that you knew would have to try to attack it? And then where do I want to contribute my time? Because the free market isn't a zero-sum game. The free market is a cooperative game where everyone wins. If you and I make a trade, like look at what we're doing right now in this Riverside app, which costs you a fraction of what it would have cost to reach this many users. Right. 10 years ago, a fraction. And now you talk to this many users and you can build a business by yourself effectively, that by providing value to a whole bunch of people. The output of that exchange is more value for you and me, more value for everybody listening from the output of the exchange that's giving value. And so it's all around us, and that is not a, so the free market is the only thing we've ever found that allows us to exchange and actually in a cooperative game where everyone wins. And we always, but there's always people trying to cheat it, right?
That's sort of the downside of human nature, like always taking things too far. So it's like the mind naturally wants productivity gains or deflation, I suppose, right? So instead of carrying eight bricks one at a time, I make a wheelbarrow to carry 8 bricks at once. So we want to get more output for less input. But then we take things too far, and then we start trying to figure out, well, then how could we cheat the system?
We want our house to go up in value.
Yeah.
We want our asset to go way up in value. And this.
Yeah.
If you think through the logic, if we're part of the system that is choosing more value, how could that be true? Unless you lived in a system distorting currency units. And then most people turn to the same things that have always stored value in those cheating systems to try to protect their value from the cheating.
Yeah. Now, one thing that I see as we move from one system to another, I talk about, back to the Abu Dhabi talk, I talked about sort of Bitcoin's price in the future, 2030 to 4050. I mean, I looked at it from a venture capital lens of like, what are the markets that are being disrupted? How much value can be taken from those markets and how much could it grow? And so then, I assigned some values to Bitcoin that seem unreal and, astronomical, unreal. And the typical reaction to hearing that Bitcoin could be worth 10 million or 15 million or 50 million is like, yeah, that means the dollar's worth zero. That means it's, $1 million for an egg or something like that, which in, Zimbabwe, eggs were, $1 million,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
A few $100 million. But like from a venture capital lens, I think that's that's a big misunderstanding, right? So it's like Bitcoin is pulling value from other areas and other assets. And so like the dollar doesn't necessarily have to become worthless for Bitcoin to rise in value. Right?
Yeah.
Like
so I think the best way to frame this is or a way I frame it, whether it's best or not, is this. If you divide the $900 trillion balance sheet by 21 million, you get $43 million terminal value of Bitcoin, today's purchasing power.
right.
And we know tomorrow there's going to be a ton of printing in that 900 trillion, all the assets within, because if there wasn't printing, all the assets would collapse to zero, right? Your house isn't worth what you think it is.
Right.
Your house is only worth because the debt underneath it is deemed solvent and it's insolvent. So it requires an input of massive manipulation of capital or of money, which will increase the 900 trillion higher. So your house will be worth more relative to those currency units. But if you did the calculation again in 2 years with more printing and the different value, then Bitcoin would appear like it'd be a higher terminal purchasing power at that time.
Exactly.
Right. And then the other thing that's happening at the same time, which is actually probably more powerful and hard to see, is that $43 million per coin purchasing power is a terminal value. Again, based on it stays decentralized and secure. You can do your own work, whether you think it will or not. But if it stays decentralized and secure, then every year, all of that productivity gain, the global free market is accruing to it because prices fall against the 43 million of purchasing power right now forever. So it's way bigger than people believe because people still right now are talking about DeepSeek. Have you seen Manus?
Yeah, I did last night. Yeah.
So if you've played with that and everything else, you could create a team of agents doing this work for you to just about do any path. And these things are coming at a rate that I don't know if you remember this in my book. I said that we used to measure AI improvements in decades, then years, then months, then minutes, then seconds.
Right.
We're getting into the months, and what's coming is the minutes and then the seconds.
Yep.
That rate of improvement is at such a staggering pace that people can't comprehend what it actually means. But if you just keep on coming back to saying the natural state of the free market is deflation, prices fall to the marginal cost of production, period, then all of that productivity gain, you take your $43 million per coin today, all of those productivity gains are flowing to you as well. Because you shouldn't be measuring inflation from zero. You should be measuring it from global productivity. And most people are measuring global productivity through the debt-based system, and they can't see what's really happening because it has to extract. It cannot allow prices to fall, so it extracts that productivity and centralizes it.
So what you're saying is, rather than measuring it against a manipulated denominator like the U.S. dollar, then you should measure it against something outside of that system like Bitcoin, and then you get a completely different answer.
Exactly. And then if you just so that's why for me I say I keep on referring to Bitcoin as a decentralized, secure protocol bounded by energy. Right. So if you understand those words, each of those words, decentralized, so nobody controls it; secure, it cannot be broken. So it can't change, can't be broken, or it can change only if people determine who are nodes to change it in their best interests.
Yep.
Protocols are winner take all. It's so there is no need for any other coin. There is one internet.
Right.
You choose to be on it or off of it. And so protocols are winner take all, and they come in layers. They add more functionalities in layers, unlike technologies which winner take most.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So what's happening is Bitcoin is evolving in layers and adding more functionality layers, and it's getting more decentralized, more secure all along. And so even most of this talk has only been on layer one.
Right.
Right. Which would, for a long time, if you couldn't do anything on layer one, if it couldn't scale, you would have all of these other coins by nature saying, I have a better Bitcoin, I have a better. So it would be natural that the free market would look at it, because it would be so confusing to understand protocols. But that protocol bounded by energy, as long as it stays decentralized and secure, reprices everything.
Yeah. And if you look back through technology and how it reaches, it reaches adoption, diffusion over different stages in that cycle, it seems to follow the same repeatable pattern where in the beginning technology doesn't scale. And so you try all these other different paths. And then it does scale, and then it gets rid of all those other paths. And so we've seen this in many other avenues, but in this case specifically, to the point that you're making, you have all these altcoins that became faster and cheaper and more private and smart contracts, et cetera. But then once we've been able to achieve the scaling on Bitcoin, then it sort of makes all those other chains irrelevant.
Yeah. I can't still think of anything that I like where Bitcoin's going, that anything I would use. Essentially what you'd say is, I'm going to use a high cost database,
right,
like a centralized controlled database, because that's what a blockchain is. I'm going to use a high cost database to centralize. I just can't see any single thing.
Did you see the piece that David Marcus put out the other day? I think it was just maybe 2 days ago, talking about what they're doing over at Lightspark, and they're building on layer 2, on Bitcoin layer 2, and he basically said, he ran, if you know who David Marcus is, for everybody in the audience, I mean, he's like the payments guy, right, from PayPal. He was the one that was behind Libra at Facebook, but he basically went into why Libra failed, and how many people have asked him if he would launch, now that there's sort of a clear runway from regulation standpoint, if they would do a Libra 2.0. And he just said, no, the market has moved on. There's no need for Libra 2.0. And one of the reasons that he gave is there wasn't really the ability to do it with Bitcoin back then, but there is today, number one. So to the point of scaling, what we're talking about. But then he went on to say, what the nations want is no government. Well, each nation wants to be able to settle in their own currency, and no nation will settle for settling on somebody else's privatized, centralized database. And so there's only one option that's decentralized that will give them this neutral ability to do this on. Then he talked about how they're building on top of Bitcoin, and he's inviting everyone to come build with them and stuff like that. But I thought, the guy who understands payments very, very well, sort of laying this out, breaking it down, I love it when I think it's funny, I should say, when I see all these people online and they're smarter than Larry Fink about money and they're smarter than David Marcus about payments and whatever, right? And so to hear him lay this out and break it down, I think it was pretty insightful, but it's saying exactly the things that we're saying. It wasn't ready then, it is now. And there's just really no way forward for the world to work globally without this decentralized layer that nobody can control.
Yeah, there is. It's called cheating and global conflict and war.
Well, I'm
right?
saying there's no way to really keep progressing forward.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, we would that would be devolving,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. So, and that's actually why I get back to all of the things inside the other system that most people are complaining about are ensuring that, like, you can feel the chaos. You can feel that, and I watch people take sides within this debate and screaming at it, and they don't know that on that system, they're making it stronger. Use the example of kind of marches on Wall Street in 2008, burn things down, turn over cars, they go home and sleep. Where did the money come to fix it all? From them.
Yeah.
Right? From them. And so now ask yourself, what are you doing with inside the system, and how are you sleeping? And like all of these things that are it's feeding on your fear, and you think there's an enemy on the other side of that fear inside that system, or you're a savior on the other side of that fear inside that system. There isn't.
Yeah,
it's all it has to be a different system. The only thing that can, and so you can tune out. You can just. I understand what I'm asking. To do the work on Bitcoin and actually understand how different this is. And that's a lot of people aren't ready to, and I know you've done a lot of work to help people understand that, but as they do, they'll understand that here's why I believe this stays decentralized and secure. Because the people centralizing, trusting ETFs, trusting all of the other central brokers, aren't running nodes. The people who know this are never going back to a corrupt system.
So the people that are seemingly participating with Bitcoin, but through these centralized mechanisms like ETFs, they're not helping the network stay decentralized and secure.
So there's a whole bunch of people that are worried that this is centrally controlled because government's for it and everything else. They don't realize how powerful the kind of voices, and I'm not saying mine, but you know these people, Mark.
Right.
You know these people all around the world, and they're running nodes, globally distributed nodes, and they are not going to allow this thing to be centralized, period. Right. So when that day comes that system says, you're going to do this because we want you to do this, that might be a really bad day for the centralized system. That might be hyper-Bitcoinization.
And in that event, and to your point, I mean, we've game planned this out so many nights, late nights, maybe over some drinks, maybe totally. Maybe not. At many events, we're sitting around game planning this out, like what are the ways that we can think of attacks here? But it seems like almost any one of those events leads to just a fork. Which is like, great, then you take your centralized coin over here, you take your new raised cap limit to 41, you take whatever it is that you want over here, and we'll just stick with old Bitcoin over here. And that's why it doesn't work.
Yeah, just like so if you were planning that attack, if you were deep state trying to plan that attack, you probably wouldn't try to attack it for another 5-6 years. You would allow Bitcoin to go way up in price to resolve your underlying debt problem, because it wouldn't resolve the debt, but you would have an asset that would be worth a lot more, so the balance sheet would look better. And then you'd hope that a whole bunch of the Bitcoiners had sold into your centralized thing, because they were actually the entire time pricing in the U.S. currency.
Right.
Right. And now they got rich, and now they were part of this, and now they didn't care. They weren't running nodes. And they got, you didn't have the same kind of cypherpunk ethic that is driving this thing, that more and more people understand that these are structural changes in the world. One is a centralized system where everybody's kind of in a control system. One is decentralized where where we have freedom. And once you understand that, which I there's a whole bunch of people that don't, right? But more are learning each day. And as they learn, as they go from, okay, I'm just going to accept I'm going to take a little bit of Bitcoin, and as you learn that path and then you become part of the network, you become one of the nodes in the network.
Right.
You're never going to change.
Now, what about, what we just saw this last week with President Trump, and finally we got clarity. We got the executive order, the U.S. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. There's a plan to add more, balance neutral, whatever, cost neutral, whatever it is, all these different things. And there's plenty of people that are out there, more so probably some of the crypto people, that are like, oh yeah, you Bitcoiners, you're like everybody else, begging for the government to buy it. My take is that, it was always coming for everything, so it's going to work its way up. But back to the point of staying decentralized and secure, and now you have, the biggest government, the U.S. dollar coming into it. So how do you think that affects things?
So just like it affects, when you make a choice, you personally, to move into this network, you can't be debased anymore, and you're participating in the first global free market ever. So what does that look like to you? And I know what it looks like to you, because we've had these talks many late nights too.
Yep.
Your life gets better and better and better and better, and you worry less about all of the chaos everywhere else. Right. And that's true for every single person. You have a globally distributed open network that any single person, whether you're in Africa, whether you're anywhere, you can make that same decision, and your life starts to get better through that. As long as you're holding if you're trading, that doesn't exist. But if you're holding, then that's what happens. And you start to learn more about why this is just such a better choice for you. So now, in your business, if a choice for you in your business, and then you'd make the business choice, you do the same thing, and you start converting your balance sheet over time. In a city or a state or a country, the same choice is happening. I can either tax my citizens in this, and then by the time I go to pay their taxes on their services, I can't deliver the services because the money's broken underneath. Or I can deliver more services forever. I can make my country richer. Not only that, I can send a signal to the world that we're open for business on a free market. Right? We're not. Freedom matters. And so, if it's true, if freedom does matter, free markets are far more productive than centralized markets, because there's more ideas competing. And there's more ideas competing for our value. So the thing that built the U.S. in the beginning is, and what created the Constitution and the wars that they fought for, was that equal. You could move from Europe, be free, and that's what created the productivity boom that was the U.S. before money got captured. So that's just happening on Bitcoin right now, and so of course governments that understand it, I would say. Does the U.S. government understand it? There's people within it that do.
Right.
There's people within it that are trying to capture it. But just like there's people within Bitcoin that understand it, and people that are pricing it through the U.S. dollar. So there's just such a complicated topic that I think each person is kind of understanding it from their own thing. And I don't pay any attention to. Of course, they're going to do it. I suspect at some point they will decide whether they want to try to capture it or if they are a free market. Right. And we'll see, and the nodes will decide.
Right.
Right.
The one thing in the game theory that I love to kind of always throw out to people who are doubting this is just that by capturing it, by changing the hard cap, by doing any of those things, you basically make it worthless. And so anybody who was able to capture a large percentage of this would, at least at this point, be doing it to acquire more U.S. dollars to build wealth, whether you're a MicroStrategy or even if you're the U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund hoping to pay off your debt at one point, right? And so by making these changes, you're essentially making it worthless. So really that would only be done by like a hostile actor.
It's even, and you know this, how anti-fragile it is. Imagine how many attacks, like if you really think through it, because obviously the NSA has known about Bitcoin for a long time.
Sure.
So they all of the major governments all over China's tried to stop it, US has tried to stop it, all Operation Choke Point. Imagine how much this is in the highest levels, trying to stop this thing that brings freedom back to the world, every individual, and you have no say. So yes, there's going to be a ton of attacks. There still will be a ton of attacks, but every single person who's attacked it has not just attacked it. They could have done better themselves and for their entire thing. The FTX, Celsius, every single person, Coinbase, if they just owned the Bitcoin instead of sold all the shit coins, they would have way more Bitcoin. Attacking it, the cheaters always lose against this, right? Every single, it's, and that's what's so fascinating. A cooperative network benefits the honest,
right? And then we have it playing out on a global scale. I mean, just today, the last couple of days, we've seen the EU announce they're going to finally roll out their central bank digital currency. And then they're coming out and bashing Trump directly, saying that by doing these cryptocurrencies, like you're threatening their sovereignty somehow. Right?
Yeah, and this is it. That's actually why I can't even listen to all of this, because we're listening to people like Lagarde and all these people that their only wealth, their only value to society is being at the top of a control system that's sucking value from society.
Right.
Why am I paying any attention to that? Why would I feed that anything? Right. Just the more you do in Bitcoin, you realize, okay, a lot of people are going to get caught in it. A lot of people are the chaos that is going to ensue is staggering. But yes, because that system must have you locked into it.
Yeah.
To retain its power over you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember years ago seeing a quote from Lagarde saying, how basically any new technology was a threat to their financial stability, which it is, because it, creative destruction creates those new ways. I want to jump into another topic, maybe the last topic here. There's a lot of talk with, Michael Saylor and now Strategy acquiring all these Bitcoin, and what are they going to do with it at some point? And there's this talk of like maybe a Bitcoin bank, which he never really confirmed or denied. But I saw this post surface the other day of Hal Finney, one of the original developers on Bitcoin, and it was in one of the old message boards. And he talked about, this future with Bitcoin banks and how, you would have holders of large amounts of Bitcoin and they could launch their own banks and then launch their own currencies on top of Bitcoin, and almost painted this sort of like free banking 2.0 sort of narrative. I'm curious how you view the future in regard to banking. I mean, banking sort of seems to have mainly three functions, right? Storing, transmitting, and then lending. But how do you think of maybe what he had talked about, this future of Bitcoin banks, having Bitcoin on the balance sheet, creating cash on top of it and things like that?
So complicated topic, but this is the layering approach to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin layer one, open decentralized protocol bounded by energy, but slow transactions, right? The reason it's decentralized and secure is the slow transactions. Slow's
a relative term.
Yeah, so let's say 5 to 7 transactions per second. So it can't handle global banking for 8 billion people.
Right.
So then Lightning Network, Liquid, Arc, a whole bunch of different kind of layer twos emerge. At first, Lightning on the layer 2 looks like kind of because it's a project, it's just on top of Bitcoin. You don't need another coin. But in the first going, it doesn't work very well. Like 40% of payments fail. You need your own liquidity channels and everything else, because you just look like it is almost a garage network, right? Because it's just emerging.
Right.
And today, where you have probably 96% of payments work every time, and it'll be 99.999. And there's 650 million people right now using Lightning.
It's crazy.
Liquid. It's a staggering number. It's growing faster than the internet did in the 90s, and people still look at it like they looked at it 5 years ago.
Right.
So what David Marcus was really saying is this has matured to a place that now you have a layered approach, that you have this layered approach. The next thing, privacy. Lightning gives some privacy, but in a world where everyone came after this, it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient because they would attack those nodes. At some point, they're centralized. You can only use this Bitcoin rather than this Bitcoin, and they would attack it. So you had to develop massive privacy within the technology, but in a layered approach that you don't have to have another coin. So you can extend the decentralized secured nature, and it can't be centralized and changed. That's why we invested in Fedi and Fediment protocol. It's built on top of these, interoperable with. It's complete privacy, and it gives you essentially a free banking era on top of Bitcoin that is completely private. So you and I, two other people could run essentially nodes on top of this. In and out of Lightning, we could have a circular economy ourselves, right? This is being used right now in Venezuela because of the dictatorship in Venezuela, and it can't be found. There's all of the communication is completely private. All of the transactions are completely private, and it's growing really fast. It's being used in kind of some of the most scary places. And we can feel this authoritarianism, the centralizing of the system, accelerate all over the world because the money is broken. Where this technology has already anticipated that problem long time ago, it completely withstands anything here, and is growing the other way, providing freedom to the world. Now it's early. And why is it early? Because most people don't know it even exists yet.
Right.
But it's all integrated. And
so are you saying though? Then I mean, you would put your Bitcoin in, and then you would get back. So that like the Bitcoin bank, you put your money in this bank, and then you get back a representative token that you can spend that's faster and cheaper and more private.
Yeah. So eCash is built into Bitcoin in this way. That and then now what would you have to worry about? You'd have to worry about if let's say you, me, two other people were the nodes, could we cheat? Could we cheat and say, we're going to fractionalize the eCash so somebody thinks they have the cash, but it's not backed by Bitcoin? And so there's a whole bunch of ways to be able to protect against that. But
well, maybe I want it to be fractionalized.
Yeah, yes, and maybe you do, and some people will try to cheat that, and then.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily even cheating, right? So it's like, think of it as earning yield. I mean, typically with a bank, you'd give your money to the bank would loan it out, and they would give you some backup yield on that for taking some risk with your money, so to speak, right?
I think here's what's happening. We have that entire fractional system is failing. Right, and because it requires more fractional, it's a Ponzi scheme all the way down, right? And it needs more and more. The yield comes from that, and the entire because if it didn't have more fractional, if it didn't have more monetary units, it fails. So here's a simple way to say this: all of the money that exists. So if everybody paid back their debt, there would be no money. Right. So and the money is loaned into existence. So when you take a loan for your house, you're adding money, right? And you're paying a fee to somebody that made it up from nothing to be able to be indentured, and then you're paying taxes on that as more and more money is lent into existence. This other system won't look like that. Now, will people try? But
it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be fractionalized, right? Like Mises would break down, circulating credit versus commodity credit, right? So it's like if I grew 10 bushels of wheat, but I only needed to consume 7, I could loan you those 3 bushels of wheat, and you give me back 3 bushels of wheat next year, right? For sure. And in that case, in Fedi, right,
so the money that eCash on top of this, it can be moved around at lightning speed, completely private. So you and I can trade in it. There's tiny fees on it, and it's global privacy. And so now, question: when would you take a loan? In how much loan would you take in an environment, an entire global system that more value is coming each year, right? So if you take huge loans where more value is coming each year, then the loan gets more expensive in real terms.
Which is exactly why our debt-based monetary system likes inflation.
You totally.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just curious. Like I said, I saw that post from Hal Finney, and I was just kind of thinking that through a little bit. If you go back in however far back, I mean, I would imagine even before there was a currency system, medium of exchange, before a ledger, before any of that, the first form of money had to have been credit, right? Like you're my neighbor in the village. Go ahead and borrow my whatever and bring me back a little bit extra, right? So I think credit would probably have been the first form of money before anything. All through the gold standard era. I mean, there's
probably barter, and then barter and then credit.
Barter and then credit.
Yeah.
Probably barter and then credit, and then all through the gold standard era. I mean, for thousands of years, some people just make more money and store money, and they're willing to loan it to people who need it. So I don't see how that changes. It's human nature. To the point that you're making, which is a very good point, it certainly changes the hurdle rate when you're going to have to pay a higher amount back than what you borrowed out, until everything is priced on that system, I suppose.
So that's the interesting thing. If you think through this, and this is where I completely agree with you, it's human nature because we were both the map and the territory, and we don't know. We've never known another system, so it would be human nature. It would be all of our history books talk about that system, and the system has changed. It's already changed. So what does that mean? What it means is because of that human nature, there's going to be mispricing and a whole bunch of people wiped out by what we just talked about over and over and over again. Because they're going to try to operate the playbook that we've lived in the last 3,000 years on top of a system that doesn't care. Right, that's exactly it. So I think we're saying the same thing, that and what will change that as they get wiped out over and as they get whipsawed by the system that is every 10 minutes there's a new block and it doesn't care.
Yeah, I was just saying, though, even in a new system, I think there's always a need for that, right? So I've been a good steward of my wealth. I've built up more than I need. I've grown 10 bushels of wheat, but I only need 7. Unfortunately for you, lightning came down and struck your wheat field and burned up your wheat. But I know you're a great farmer. So
Yep.
How about I get you 3 bushels of wheat because I know you're gonna grow it back, and next year you just give me 4 bushels back. Like there's
Yep.
always that need for credit. There's always hardships. It's just life, and somebody does better with it than somebody else. And so I just don't think that part changes.
No, I just mean what we're talking about is the amount on a system based on credit. Then what people think about. So let's use a house as an example. A house is falling to we use credit for houses, and everybody thinks it's normal right now to have $1 million mortgage.
Right.
It's only normal because of the system of underlying credit that has pushed up prices of houses to a monetary premium to support that. And if it fails, and so the prices will still rise in houses from that system. But if you measure that house in Bitcoin, like my house in Bitcoin in the last 5 years has dropped from 300 Bitcoin to say 26 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And so what is that saying? It's saying a house is falling back to its utility value.
Right.
In the money that's valuable. Could I still take a loan for that? Yes, I could take a loan to pay for the house today in Bitcoin, but I know in 4 or 5 years that house is going to be 1 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right. So that means my loan gets more expensive. So or I lose a whole bunch of purchasing power to buy the house today rather than tomorrow because the house is falling to its utility value. And that credit destruction or that is going to not be understood by very many people.
Right. And yeah, that is going to shift for sure. And I think the entire sort of almost retirement industry, if you will change, right? Where like you have all these people that are saving for 20, 30, 40 years and they're hoping they can live off 4% a year or something like that. But you won't need that yield when your money buys you more in the future instead of less.
Right.
And so that incessant need for, desire to earn yield to retire on or whatever, I think that part goes away. But the need, there's always going to be a need to borrow for some reason or another. Right?
Yeah, and what makes these conversations so fascinating is the change in something that is totally changed the rules.
Yeah.
And us grappling with the rule change and trying to predict kind of when, how, what that looks like. But if you step back and just say, okay, which system would I want to be in?
Yeah.
Right. As this is going to be chaotic as on the way through. That's
one thing I like about is this force functioning, where really, if you really study like the difference of a poor, middle class, or a wealthy person, and really I should say the mindset of that person, you sort of have the poor mindset mentality, or even a middle class. They basically work to live, work to pay their bills. So they earn to spend money on their house and their car and their lifestyle. They'll typically use credit to buy things they can't afford or to increase their lifestyle. Whereas like a wealthy person is earning money not to live, they earn money to buy assets, and then the assets pay for them to live. And they don't use credit because they can't afford things. They use credit because it's cheaper to use somebody else's money than their own.
Yeah.
And so Bitcoin would almost force that function, whereas to the point you were making about borrowing in Bitcoin to pay for the house, but it's harder and harder to pay back the loan, it would almost like you'd earn and put it into Bitcoin and then borrow against the Bitcoin to buy the house.
Yeah. So
it forces you into the correct form, which is buy to earn the assets and have the assets pay for the life.
Yeah.
Right.
And think about that asset being repriced. So what we're talking about, so all of the people that are pricing those assets way too high in fiat terms because it's worked for the last 40, 50 years.
Right.
They believe that their house is the house and the real estate asset and all of even though the taxes are going up and up on them, because other people are paying those rents, they believe it's a safe store of value. And that safe store of value, and they keep on doing it, levering more and more to it. When we just described for the person, the person working for wages and moving those wages into Bitcoin is repricing them.
Right.
Right. That's it. That's what's happening. So it's really interesting, and that repricing can happen in Africa, Argentina, Peru. It can happen anywhere for anybody who wants to do that. So what's happening today is, you and I've talked a lot about this. The risk-free rate of return is like 43%, right? If you're self-custodying, and if you're making 7 or 8 in real estate, you're losing 35% a year to Bitcoin, but you think you're winning because other people are losing faster than you.
Yeah. Yeah, and to put it to numbers, I mean, the median U.S. home price in 2016 was like $260,000. Today it's about $460,000. So it's almost doubled in that time period. But it's gone from, a roughly 20 Bitcoin down to about 4 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
In that same time period.
So it's describing that process. You said it before. It's describing that process that is happening when people are asking, when is this going to happen?
It's happening.
Yeah, it's happening. It keeps happening. It will continue to happen.
The one thing I will just throw out there, just because I'm an old real estate guy, I can't let it go. In America, it's a little bit different. 30-year fixed mortgages, but more importantly, it's the tax treatment that we get. So Trump in his first term, and now it just got reinstated, gives us like bonus depreciation, and we get like short-term rental exclusions and things like that. So somebody with a W-2 income, with earned income, could get up to 100% write-off of an asset. So I could put 10% down on I could put $10,000 down on a $100,000 home and write off $100,000 of my income and have an extra $90,000 to buy Bitcoin with. And then I could have inflation debt destruction. I could have tenants paying down. So that's a little bit more of an advanced strategy, but
I think that's actually really important to call out too, because in all of these things, there's going to be tax strategies that you can take and play a system differently, and I think that's important too, mind you, and which plays into what I think will happen in Bitcoin. Governments and states and are going to lower capital gains taxes and try to make this, because they're going to try to attract the capital that is in this.
So, like, you get better tax treatment if you keep it in an ETF than if you custody it yourself or something like that.
Yeah, well, I hope that's not the case, but they might try to do that.
Yeah.
But just if like what El Salvador did, and you've been a number of times, I've been a number of times. The change is dramatic from opening up a free market and being Bitcoin positive. The tourism, the change is so dramatic.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be repeated, and other countries are going to compete against that.
Yeah. What would you say for the average person who hasn't put the time in that you have and doesn't understand the decentralized and secure theme? For the average person who's just came into Bitcoin now with Trump and the strategic Bitcoin reserve and all of that talk, what would you say the biggest thing they'll probably be shocked about over the coming year would be?
How fast the world that they thought they lived in is disintegrating, and how that chaos is going to expand and ripple across. It's just going to be, if you're not expecting, if you don't realize how much debt is underlying and how insolvent it is, and if you think Elon's going to save you because he's ripping out wasted bureaucracy, that wasted bureaucracy today is also, they all have jobs, they all spend, they all buy houses, they all buy food, they all spend in the economy, is part of the GDP. When you rip it out, you cause a deflationary collapse faster. So this is so there's so many people right now that cheering for one side or the other, without the realization that underneath the whole thing, underneath the entire thing, needs to be so much printing that is just centralizing more. Because it's I'm fascinated by how many people are taking a side within this, and not understanding the implications of their side within this.
Yeah.
So and then talking about Europe, or talking about Iran, or talking about Israel, or talking about, of course, the entire system looks like it's based on corruption. Of course it does, because it's based on manipulation of your time and energy. And the things you're doing in that, the things you're going to do that is going to give away your power into the centralization. And it has to go back to AI. The rate of improvement of AI, it will never be this slow again. It will never, say that again and again and again. It will never be this dumb again. It'll never be this slow again.
Yeah.
Never. It is going to go at a rate that your brain cannot comprehend. And you will, and if you don't use it, other businesses are going to use it to provide more value, and it's going to remove labor at a staggering rate.
So either move to something that cannot be replaced, physical services, or get with the program and jump on
it. It's even physical services inside that. So if you lived in a control structure, if all of your stuff was inside that control structure, and you had cameras everywhere and monitoring, and you were driving an electric car that was going to, they could turn off, and you were in a bank account, and you had gold, but you were in a bank account that could be turned off anytime. If you understood how much of your stuff is tracked right now inside this system, and you think it isn't, all of these connected systems are all part of that centralized control. You are inside of that. You're in the matrix, centralizing with everything you're doing. There isn't a thing that is safe within that system. It's a system change. And Bitcoin is repricing that. It's outside, because you can self-custody this. You can take this off and you can store the words in your head. You don't have to trust that system. It's immune from everything I just said. So now just ask yourself, where am I spending my time, and what does that look like? There is no safety. There's what people say, I got guns, I have a ranch land. Think about Think of what I'm saying. think about robotic dogs, drone swarms, all AI things. Where are you safe in a centralized system that takes all of its control through manipulated money? What is safe? Good luck, right? Help build the other system, because that's what frees you.
There you go. I think that's a perfect place to end it. Go build the other system. I say build the world that you want. So
Bingo.
I do get a little pet peeved by a lot of these Bitcoiners who think they can just go disappear on a hill and with their 6.25 Bitcoin or whatever and emerge like Punxsutawney Phil, and like the whole world's changed for them. It's like, if you're not going to go build the world, who's going to do it?
Yeah. That's it. This is what Bitcoin, when you really realize it, is it connects all of us on a global free market that can't be cheated. It's a cooperative system. So then it's not saying anything about Bitcoin. It's saying something about your choices.
Powerful. All right, Jeff Booth, we're going to end it with that. You wrote a great book. You referenced it multiple times. The Price of Tomorrow. We'll link to that below. Anything new coming out the pipe that people should be paying attention to?
I'm toying around with a new book, but I haven't completely committed to it yet. So we'll see.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Yeah, you're great seeing you, buddy.